Welcome to Pencil versus Pixel. My name is Caesar, and I have the pleasure of being joined today by the very talented Mr. Mike Coos. Thank you for being on the show, Mike.
Pleasure to be here.
So a little bit about Mike. He is a UK-based designer specializing in web and user interface design. He also does graphic design, branding, illustration, and photography. Some of his past clients include Microsoft, Twitter, Future Insights Conference, and the Smashing Magazine. So Mike, before we continue, I'm going to ask you what I ask all of my guests. Pencil or pixel?
Both.
Both?
Yeah. I know. Definitely use both. Yeah, is the question, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
They're both close to my heart. I always some of my work. Maybe not so much now, but in the past, I've used a lot of sort of illustration involved, in my web design work. So really, they cross over quite a lot.
Yeah, that's actually how I got to know your work. Was and we'll get a little bit into it in just a moment. But yeah, you've done a lot of illustration work back in the Personify days, and but yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a moment. So Mike, I've given a little background about who you are and what you do, but let's get to know you better. What's your story?
Well, education-wise, I guess I spent 3 years doing an art degree, and my first job was I worked for the Body Shop, the cosmetics company.
Huh.
I just sort of came up when I was at college. They didn't have any. There was only one computer for the whole department, so I never really got any use out of it. So when I joined the Body Shop, they basically trained me up on Photoshop and Illustrator and stuff, and that's where I sort of honed my sort of graphic design craft. And I progressed. I started off being sort of desktop publishing, really putting together sort of visual merchandising booklets for how to lay out the stores, and then from there I progressed to doing sort of the window posters and point of sale graphics, which was pretty good. And so for a long time I wasn't really involved in the web at all, and it's only in 2007 when I sort of decided. Well, really, I realized that being a graphic designer really had become, web design had become part of that. And really designing for the web, as far as I could see, was just part of a modern graphic designer's skill set. So I realized I had to sort of get in on the web design scene, and I had a friend of mine who I was working with at the time who gave me the basics of HTML and CSS, and I started building websites. And so in 2007, and sort of most of 2007 and the early 2008, I was just learning, and then in May 2008, I got my sort of first web design position, after having been in print for the last 10 years, which was at Personified. And and it was great. It was a perfect match, that company, for me, because not only were they a web company, but they were extremely keen on my, creative side, my more illustrative and graphic design background. And I sort of had a great opportunity to explore both sides of the coin there, so I could there was no expectation for me to become more web focused. I could just really bring my brand of design to the web, and which was great fun. Sorry, go on. No, I was just going to say, so I had 3 great years there, and since 2011 I've sort of run my own small design business, in which it's really only myself, but I put together each little project. I might put together a team of 2 or 3 people, sort of really it's a bespoke sort of set up for each project, depending on what the project requires.
That is awesome. How would you say that your background in graphic design and a lot of printed design has helped you with your web design?
Well, I think when I first started out in the web, I think I hit the web at a good time because I feel like it was then, even back then in 2007, I think it was just really, people were just starting to get much more creative with the web. I feel like it perhaps been, the web had really been a domain of developers for a long time, which makes sense, right? And also it was limited up to a point to what you could do on the web, so it was only, I think, really in the mid 2000s that people were starting to get very visually creative in the web, and I was perhaps a little bit late to the party, but when I came in, it was very much a good time to be doing visually interesting web design, and that was perfect for me because I don't think I ever I had a sort of with a slight naivety on the practical and coding side, which I had. I never really thought about the front end development part as I never really thought about the barriers it may throw up. So I just designed what I wanted and then made it work. And so I felt that in a way that was a real. I felt like that sort of slight naive approach was actually beneficial for me. So sorry, I just got a call coming. Sorry. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit. Before you began your design career, was it something that you've pursued for a very long time? Was it something that sort of developed over time?
Yeah, I think really I feel lucky in this respect, that at school and stuff I was always, the only thing I was really any good at was drawing. And I wasn't brilliant at that actually. I was sort of average, but maybe a bit better than average. But it was always like obvious to me that I'd end up doing something to do with design. So or art maybe, but yeah, but it was always sort of graphic leaning. So I, when I left school, I did basically a sort of a foundation art course, and I went into graphic design and back to art again. And yeah, so it was one of those things where I never really deliberated about what I would do. I just, I was always going to go that way, which I think is sort of really quite helpful, really, because these days, I've got some brothers and sisters and stuff, and some of them have got complete career paths mapped out, but others, are extremely sort of talented and they're clever, but it's not obvious to them what they want to do yet. And I think I think having sort of just knowing what you want to do is actually pretty helpful, And I was lucky enough to sort of just know what I wanted to do.
So you had like a general idea of what you wanted.
Yeah, just roughly to do with design. So no more complicated than that. But so the fact I ended up on web is pretty much just luck, really. But I mean, it was.
Yeah, what was it that attracted you to the web? I mean, you were saying that early on, it was sort of not graphically not as appealing as it is now.
Yeah.
But what was it that you saw in web design that made you decide I want to give this a try?
Well, I think what it was really was just the natural way of things in the design industry. So I was getting more and more requests for web design. In fact, I was getting, a bunch of, I was sort of working for a company and doing some freelance stuff. And I was just getting a load of, everyone kept asking me to do websites, and I couldn't. So I was just like, I've really got to, I was sort of really bored of, passing on the work to my colleagues and friends,
Yeah.
So I just basically thought I'm going to learn this, So.
And this is before Personified, right?
Yeah, it's before Personified. Yeah, yeah. So but the great funny thing about the web was though is that when I used to what I hated about working in the web. I had done some web design, but not built it myself, and I was always really frustrated of handing work over and it never coming back how I thought it was going to come back. And then just like in trying to sort of sort of like wrangle with developers to sort of change my my designs all the time, and people telling me things weren't possible, and I was just like, surely it's possible, And so when I actually got hold of the code myself, I actually felt it an extremely liberating experience to just make everything just exactly how I wanted it,
Yeah.
And I mean, ironically, now I do less coding again, but that's only because I'm running a bunch of projects at the same time, and my design skill is more in demand than my development skill. And and it's also a lot better than my development skill. But I mean, because of people, I work with developers who are way better than me at making, doing the code now. But it was still invaluable to learn all that stuff, And now, obviously, my relationships with developers are very easy because I understand it. I can easily have a conversation about it. If I've employed a developer to work with me, I can easily have a conversation about the code and what we should do, and and with a complete understanding of how a website works, which I think is still probably pretty essential.
Absolutely. Would you say that it's probably best just to stick to one thing anyway, right? Instead of spreading yourself through all these.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a strange one there, because I think back in one of the things before I learned coding or front end development was one of the crazy things. I used to see job adverts all the time, and they'd say, yeah, you have to be brilliant graphic designer, no HTML, CSS, PHP, Flash,
Wow.
JavaScript.
Man.
You would see all this stuff. They'd want you to know everything. I just thought,
Yeah.
how are you supposed to understand all these technologies? And it was the Custonified job. It was the first job I'd really seen. It just said, be a good designer and know HTML and CSS. And I was like, well, yeah, I can do that. It didn't require all the extra stuff. So I was like, but now I think what's weird now is that not weird, but I guess people used to always talk about this whole coding and design thing. Do you need to know both? And I think obviously it's an advantage, but I think what's crazy now is you see jobs, especially with bigger firms, and there'll be people like designing, there'll be people who are doing UX, people who are doing user interface, people who are doing iconography, people who are doing illustration. And an app like, say the iPhone app for Dropbox or something. It might, there would be like a whole bunch of different designers contributing to that application. And never mind splitting code and design. Design is split up into different things now. So you might be a UI designer, or you might specialize in iconography or something. I mean, I think it's, things are, I think when you get to the sort of bigger scale companies and projects, things are cut down into even more specialized areas.
Now, the apps that you've worked on, has that been the case where you were splitting the job, the work between different specializations?
Well, I personally haven't, because
Okay.
I would work. I've designed like a bunch of apps, and normally I would design all the UI and all the icons and everything. But because they're not like they're not
Major corporate.
They're not major corporate apps. But I know of I have got an insight into it, and I know people who work in these corporations, and this sort of, I know how sometimes how these things can be split down into skills that are different areas of design, which is just interesting. I just think it's interesting now that happens, whereas it was always in the past always felt like you were expected to do everything. Whereas now I think it's a good thing that people can specialize in more specific areas. I mean, the sort of concept of being able to do, especially now when web technology is so much more powerful than it once was. I mean, there are so many different aspects of the web that you can be good at and can specialize in. I mean, now I mean, even front end development is so much more complicated now, really, than it used to be, with different screen resolutions, responsive design. I mean, there's so much to think about. I mean, I was lucky when I got into it, everything was still fixed width, you know. So I was like, just had this, it was like pretty much was just like graphic design in a way on the web. Whereas there still has, obviously graphic design still exists on the web, but you know, the notion of I don't think responsive web design really is a thing anymore, is it? It's actually just web design.
That is so true. That's so true.
So
How do you feel about the changing dynamic of web design? I mean, because it changes. It's changing every single day. It seems.
yeah, it is crazy actually. And I think two aspects. I think technically, from a technical aspect, you know, or practical aspect, like of responsive design and stuff, I think that's sort of like you become used to that quite quickly. And I work with people I work with. I have a very sort of deep understanding with them, and you know, I don't really have to talk about it too much to them. The developer I work with quite commonly is very. I still design stuff either on desktop or mobile, and you know, we've just got an understanding of how it's going to work across without having to say too much to each other. But I think one of the things I noticed, obviously, in the last year or two, which was, and I was always I think visually, from aesthetically on the web, I think it's interesting how rapidly it's changed in the last year. You know, like it suddenly the whole inverted commas flat design thing came in,
Right.
which I was always completely bemused by, because to me I've never really understood. I never actually had flat design could be a thing, you know. Because I mean, I was never really into this sort of skeuomorphic thing anyway. Do you know what I mean? I mean, but even my, you know, going right back to my personified site I designed in 2009 was completely flat.
That's so
You know,
true.
yeah, but I mean, but it's so I thought it was funny when everyone started talking about flat design as if it was a technique and not just a style, which it is just a style. You know, it's just a. But I think what it accelerated flat design though was this probably was stuff like, for example, the changing resolutions in screen. So it's easier to use you know, much more practical to use SVG graphics and things like that. It's almost like a little bit resetting the dials to cope with a new era of devices and screens. You know, and it's nice. It's a nice, refreshing change visually. But I just can't get over the rate of change. It's like suddenly, I mean, for a few years, you know, in the skeuomorphic years, it lasted for a long time. That didn't it? You know,
Since
that stuff.
'07, I guess. Right.
Yeah, right up till probably 2000.
2011.
Yeah, beginning of 2012 even. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it was in early 2012 it started to change, you know, but a lot. But then rapidly now, everything went sort of flat. And then in the last year now, photography is massive on the web. I actually think, yeah, I mean, now everyone's got gigantic images everywhere. But I think I find quite a bit, which is, it's interesting to see, but I feel like visually, aesthetically, the web's actually become a bit boring again, which is just because not. I think there's people less. It's like I feel like the trends have really gripped people again in a way that they never have. Like it's it's almost like there is only one way to design a website now.
Almost like people are not being as innovative, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
think yeah, maybe. I mean, I think visually. I mean, to me, the great thing I think it's a good thing in a way. Well, for me, I think it's a good thing because I feel like what I find interesting about a web project, is how to approach it from a visual point of view. And because I often get hired to do things, you know, to sort of create a brand
right.
identity as well as a website. So it's really about the whole feel of the thing. But what I find crazy is that there's so many companies out there who are now appearing that their web presence is identical to the next person. You know, they've all got a gigantic picture of someone in a coffee shop at the top. You know, a little bit of a blurred background and a sign up button, and you know, and then just a white bit of four icons, and which is, you know, it's, I
All
mean,
based on the Bootstrap framework.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But I think it's crazy that I mean, sometimes it's completely warranted, that style and approach. But I feel like some companies, I feel like people feel obliged to do it like that almost. So people feel like, I don't feel that as many companies are willing to break that mold as much. It seems to me that there are literally tens of thousands of websites that all look the same, which is weird because you'd think they'd have different stories to tell.
But they all look
Go
almost identical.
telling the same story, But but it's just a sort of an observation. I felt like even one thing about the skeuomorphic days was that people were approaching web design from different visually from slight, even though they were doing. Some people were doing different things to other people. There was like trends, but there was maybe like 3 or 4 different trends, that you might follow. Whereas now there just seems to be one, which is basically giant photographs, white backgrounds.
And 4 icons.
Yeah, it's like there is only one way to do a site now. But it's just I don't know. I just sort of about what I love about web design is the opportunity, not to do that if you can.
Yeah, where do you draw inspiration from?
Well, I have a little I have this little theory, a sort of thing that I call sort of storytelling through design. And normally, when I get asked to do something for a company, I recently designed a couple of agency sites. One was mixed.co.uk.
Oh yeah, which looks amazing.
Cool, thanks.
I'll definitely have it in the show notes too. That's just an amazing. That's one of your few. What's just one of the many actually amazing things you're doing.
Oh, cool, thank you. Cheers. But another one was which I've done recently, which I think it was craftsman.io, which is quite a. I think
it's the one with the glasses.
Yeah, it's just quite. I just basically sort of thought it was. Basically what I do is these companies like they're a digital agency like craftsman.io, and basically I just wanted to just do something that was sort of bold and super simple. And what I do is I sort of think of copy, like strap lines, and try and create a hook almost to design around. So in the case of Mixed, it was I created a strap line, beautiful form, perfect function, which was really the seed of that design, and everything that came from that phrase visually. Well, everything visual on that site really came from that phrase, from the big home pages with the objects, and then right down to the way I treated all the UI and iconography on that site. And likewise with the Craftsman site, it was really, I sort of took inspiration from that sort of old school 8-bit graphic style, and just I think I just, it's just super simple, and it's just trying to, I don't know, create a tone, a feeling for a certain, to try and express the nose in the Craftsman was to express the sort of main phrases, like exploring digital realm really, and and having something like that to design from gives you the sort of ammunition you need to create a visual identity. And really, that's what I try to do, especially with the companies that I'm sort of rebranding. I mean, I do more standard-looking sites, with big photographs and icons and stuff where it's needed. But I feel that in certain things, like you're doing an agency site where they can have an identity is different to somebody else's identity that makes them stand out. There's an opportunity there on those sites to try and do something that makes their site different to the next person's site. And so I feel like it makes complete sense to me to try and do something that isn't necessarily what you see around, for those companies.
Absolutely. And you were talking about storytelling through design, and that's a topic that you speak of when you do when you speak in front of crowds.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's something that I think it's something it's sort of become the backbone of my work. You know, I feel that is how, and the earliest experience, the earliest, I feel like I've always probably done it, but I think the earliest conscious experience of doing that was the Personified site I did in 2009, when I realized I was trying to express the company through the visual design of that site. And suddenly I realized that in itself, understanding that notion of trying to express the personality or the brand attributes of a company through the visual design in itself gives you reason to create a certain design. You know, it's because you sit there and you think, well, what am I going to do? You know, what can I do? But then grasping hold of that idea that you're trying to tell someone very quickly about a company, and you need to get across certain factors, you know, like, is the company creative? Are they fun, or are they serious? Are they selling you insurance, or are they trying to get you to go to a web conference? You know, thinking about what they do and what their personality is gives you tons of ammunition to design with, you know. And to me, that's you know, that's what I guess I see that is what I do. I think, you know, I mean, the actual technical aspect of designing websites, sort of, to me, obviously, is massively important. But it's sort of a more standard format approach, because, you know, using a website needs to be an experience that you're used to and has conventions that you stick to. Not saying you can't break those conventions, you can, but I think when you're talking about the usability of the site, you need to be doing stuff that people understand.
Exactly.
So to me, my approach on a website, my approach to web design on that side is very much making sure that I'm not challenging the user at all. So I don't want them to feel like challenged by using the site, but I do want them to feel sort of surprised and excited about the messages that are coming across visually, you know.
So you mean you don't want to challenge the user as in make it difficult for them to navigate?
No, yeah. I don't want it, so it's not supposed to be clever and quirky in that respect ever. I mean, it's supposed to be simple as hell.
Like
to use, you know?
secret pages, and you click on this, it'll
Well,
take you somewhere.
yeah, no, I see some of the sites. I mean, you know, I've seen some amazing creative sites, and I'm actually, you know, awards.com.
Yeah.
I'm sort of judging that this year, you know. Yeah, this year, just they asked me to be a judge, so I'm judging it. It's quite nice because you get to look at a bunch of sites every week and evaluate them. And there's some seriously creative stuff, you know, some very, very clever stuff that, you know, I couldn't do technically anyway. But what's crazy is that sometimes, you know, I feel like, I mean, one of the things that I think a lot of the stuff that gets submitted to that awards is quite crazy and creative, which, you know, I love. But at the same time, a few of the submissions I've come across, you know, they are definitely completely, what's the word? They're definitely sacrificing the usability for the creative aspect, which is, you know, fine if you want to do that. I mean, personally, I try not to do that. I don't want to because there's nothing more irritating than not understanding what you have to do in a website, right?
Yeah, is it difficult to create that balance between usability and making it as creatively appealing as possible?
I think probably, you know, I mean, to me, that's the sort of really the holy grail in web design, is to try and strike that balance. It's basically creating something that's emotionally stimulating, gets the message across, and works very easily. And it is that balance that makes a great website. And I think in the past, in my early days, I probably sometimes didn't strike that balance in the favor of being creative. But I feel like, to me, I never wanted to. But in becoming more aware of what makes a website work and what makes it a nice experience, I never wanted it to compromise the creativity either, though. So I've always sort of, I guess, sold myself as someone who can strike that balance, you know. I mean, I don't know if I always do. Hopefully, I do. But for me, that's what designing a great website is striking the balance between creativity and I mean, to me, I guess there shouldn't be any compromise on the usability of a site. End of story.
Absolutely.
There just shouldn't be any compromise on that. And there's I think there's a lot of stuff in web design right now that people are sort of being a bit more like. There's a lot of people, like, for example, it's very trendy, for example, to insert a menu button instead of having a menu. And in some cases, it makes sense because you might have 30 items. But in a lot of cases, people are just sticking this menu button in, and there's only 5 things on it, and there's 4 things on it. It's like it's just in there because it's a trend.
You mean a menu button on a desktop?
Yeah,
Just a menu button?
Yeah, which is quite popular now, isn't it? I don't know if you've seen, but there's tons of sites that just have that as standard, which visually makes it less cluttered. But
Right.
it means you've got to click every time you want the menu to appear, then choose your thing. And if you only got 3 items, there's no point doing that, is there? I mean, an example of my new site that I've just launched, my new MikeKoos.com site, you'll notice that
Which is amazing, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, yeah. You'll notice that full width. It has once you get down to it's got the full menu, but once you get down to a tablet portrait size, it then becomes a menu that opens up over the top.
Oh, like when you squeeze it down.
Yeah, it has to be right down below to portrait tablet size.
Yeah.
But then you get that sort of menu that just opens up over the top. It's still pretty easy to use, but I don't really think
Very easy to use.
It seems to me unnecessary to do that though at desktop size in some cases.
Mike, is there we were talking about earlier, just a moment ago, how some designers, for the sake of being very creative, compromise usability of their website. And it just reminded me of asking you if you've experienced any big challenges in your career. Can you tell us about a big challenge that you've experienced, and maybe a setback, and what you did to overcome that?
I don't know. I can't really think. I mean, I think going back, I think one thing the biggest challenge I come up against, because like I said to you, my web design that I do, to me, my sort of thing that I sell to people is it's not just making a website that works, it's making a website that works but also sells what you do, whether you're a web design agency or you're a clothes retailer or a conference events company, And so really it's like, obviously it's got to work, but secondly, it's to try and sell it to the potential customers, and, create a vision of what they are. And I think my hardest part of my job, I feel, is thinking up those things. That it's like, so when, for example, when Mixed came to me, they, like most of the agencies that come to me, they just want to have a site that sells them. Sells them as an agency that's, dynamic, innovative, can get the job done, and make people want to go to them. And so, for example, going back to the Mixed site where I thought up that strapline, beautiful form, perfect function, it's like there's a lot of time before I get to that point. I spend an awful lot of time, because all I've got at that point is that I've got 6 pictures of the team, a paragraph about what they do, and that's it. There is nothing else. So I'm sort of trying to think up a whole story around that company, and to me, that's what I get paid to do now. It's creating companies' identities almost, along with a website, and managing to marry those 2 things together in a way that works. And so long before I got to that strapline, I was just thinking all sorts of different ideas. And then once I do get to that strapline, then I'm thinking how to illustrate that strapline. And so every project, I get a lot of, I do run into creative block quite a lot, and I have a project thinking, how am I going to, and I've got another potential web agency site I'm going to be doing soon, and a couple of projects, and and they're all up for grabs. What I'm going to do for those, they're all like there are those jobs where I've got to think something up. I've got to think of a theme. I've got to think of some sort of catch that will
That's really
give me.
awesome.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, it could be that this web design agency site might revolve around, I don't know. It could revolve around, for some reason, nature or something.
Okay. Okay.
And bits of grass or something. I mean, it's probably not, but it could be something crazy that I just haven't thought of yet. And then, but I'll think of a reason to tie it in, and it'll help me tell the story of that company. I mean, so every project like that is a challenge, and each one of them is sometimes quite a hurdle to get over. And it's the first couple of weeks purely just thinking about the project that is the biggest hurdle. And sometimes I have to go back to the company and sell the idea into them. Like, for example, with the mixed one, I did, because I went back to them for a big picture of a pencil on the screen and a picture of a spoon. I went, hey, I've got this idea. I'm going to have a big spoon on the homepage.
Did you
And they're
show up
like,
with the big pencil?
yeah, no, I didn't. But I did just send them a couple of big screenshots of just a big yellow page of a pencil on it and a spoon. So they're like, obviously they see that and they're thinking, big spoon, big pencil in it. So I've got to sort of talk to them, make them, they didn't need much convincing, luckily, but, I had to just sort of give a bit of explanation, obviously, of what I was trying to do, what I was trying to achieve.
Were there times when you had to really explain and really sell the idea to a client?
I think normally it's relatively simple. If there has been a time that has happened, it normally doesn't go anywhere, because if it's that hard to sell in, it probably isn't that great an idea. Because I mean, I have had projects that I've had an idea to sell in, and they just haven't really bought it. And I might think it's good, but it maybe doesn't strike the right chord with them, and I've had to revisit it. But normally that doesn't happen, because I talk with them a lot before I begin. So it's very much, it should be by the time I'm producing actual, visuals, that we're pretty much on the same page thought process wise. So
Now I'm curious, like when before beginning the project, do you just sort of get to know them, or how
yeah,
can you walk us through sort of what you
but
do in
yeah,
that case?
well, yeah, basically, I get to have a few Skype calls with them, and I sort of basically, if it's the if it's one of these sites that I'm sort of creating a site along with an identity, I basically sort of interview them in a way. And it's not, I don't call it an interview, do you know what I mean? But I just speak with them, and I basically just make notes about, and just ask them about the company, how they see their company, what they want other people to think when they see their company, and what it is they're trying to sell, in a practical way, and what it is they're trying to sell in a maybe a bit more of an emotional way. And I basically just sketch all these notes down while I'm speaking to them, and then I'll go away and I'll sort of filter them down to keywords almost. And then out of those keywords, I'll start to create little sentences that maybe try and sum that company up in a sentence. And then that's when I get down to the strap line, like for, the beautiful form, perfect function, or for the Craftsman one that was like digital explorers and digital scientists, etc. And then from that point there, from getting those strap lines, I then have something solid to base a visual around, and I use those words and those sentences to create the visuals to reinforce the words. And once I've created the first screen, so that then informs the rest of how I treat the rest of the layouts and also the more detailed UI aspects of the design. And because obviously the overall design then affects the UI and how I treat typography, form, fields, everything. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to switch it up here, but I want to talk about your photography, which is amazing photography, by the way. And if you guys haven't followed Mike Coos here on Instagram, he has some phenomenal shots on his feed. I mean, amazing. I'll have that on the show notes as well. But is photography something that you've been doing for a long time?
It's just I guess I say I do photography now, I guess, in like on my bio because it has become a semi-professional thing for me now. But it's just a hobby for me. The funny thing is I've always just had a sort of a passive, I guess, interest in it. You know, I just something. But the one thing I could never really get to grips with is carrying around a big camera. So when phones got good enough to take decent pictures, I started to take more pictures. And just before Instagram came out, I was literally you know, not long before that, I had started to purposely take pictures on my phone, do a little bit of editing, and post them to Twitter. And then suddenly Instagram was there. So on the day one Instagram came out, I signed up, and it just was basically everything I was looking for. You know, being an amateur photographer, because you could take a picture with your phone, post it within seconds, share it, get feedback, and it was just perfect. You know, so I just took to Instagram very quickly, and that was such a, you know, Instagram was obviously such a popular app. The community was thriving within days. There was hundreds of people already had. I think it was weird. I don't know. I remember feeling surprised. I think about after a week, I had 300 followers. I thought that's weird because I was like, and it was only been the app had only been alive a week, and I had you know, it took me about a year to get 300 Twitter followers. So, but then, yeah, I guess it was just. But then, you know, as Instagram grew and I got more followers, I sort of started to do some projects with brands. And I just did it for fun. But now, you know, like I did, went to London Fashion Week and did a sort of behind the scenes shoot for Burberry, and then I ended up doing some other things for other companies. And lately, I've been to India with Land Rover, doing some photography with them, and Colorado with them as well. And I went to Barcelona with Ford. So it's sort of, I've done some shots for tourist boards and stuff, you know.
So are those
So,
as a result of your photography?
well, I'd
Well, I don't know
say
if
so.
it's just Instagram or anything, but just in general, was that because these
So,
companies saw your photography, they wanted you to.
well, it's a combination of my photography and the amount of followers I've got. Yeah, because obviously they're sort of hiring me to post stuff on my feed as well. So, and I've got 750,000 followers now. So, you know, but it's yeah, I mean, it's very nice to have a sideline that, you know, lets you indulge in your hobby as part of your living. You know.
Do you now take
So,
more pictures with cameras, or is it
no, I
still
just still use my phone. Yeah.
you still use a phone? Wow.
I don't have a camera actually. I have
Oh,
got a
that's
camera,
amazing.
but someone I keep lending it out to people. But it's just that thing of like getting the camera out and trying to work it all.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I actually understand photography quite well from a practical point of view. I used to have a lot of film cameras when I was young, and you know, I understand how to take a picture technically. You know, like I understand how, you know, I understand the sort of practical aspect of light, you know, aperture and film speed and, you know, shutter speed. I understand all those things and how to do that. But I would much prefer just like, you know, I sort of hate technology, you know, so it's weird being in the web industry, but I sort of, I'm not really like, I hate having an SLR of hundreds of things to do.
Yeah.
I'd much rather just have a camera with a, you know, button, choose your film speed manually, choose your aperture, and shoot a picture that way manually. I sort of don't like when you've got hundreds of menus and things, and that's what puts me off a camera. You know, I don't want to have to sit there working out what to do. I just want to take a picture. You know?
And then you just lose the shot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a phone. That's the beauty. The one thing that's nice about phone photography is that there is only one thing to do, and that's press the button. So, and it's really about. I think photography as well is so much. I think 99% of taking a good photograph is about the choices you make when you take that photograph, and not really the hardware you've got in your hand. You know. So, yeah, I think people often ask me what camera I use on Instagram. You know? and it's like on my phone. You
I
know,
was
it's
about
like
to ask you that.
yeah.
Congratulations on being nominated as Designer of the Year for the Net Awards.
Oh, thanks. Cheers.
Do you have any books or pieces of software that you would recommend to any designer or creative professional out there?
Yeah, books thing's funny. I don't really look at books and that. Not technical books. I've never. Well, no, it's a lie actually. The one, I mean, for learning design, I just think the best thing to do is design. I
Yeah,
mean, I just look around the net, see what other people are doing, go on those sort of inspiration sites, and like Design Inspiration, and other sites just collect people. Those sort of scrapbook sites. I
right.
always look through those and stuff, and then just design as much as you can. I don't think you can learn design from a book. I mean, I think there's certain things, obviously, technically in web design you can, like coding and CSS and stuff. But I've just personally, the only book I've read on that front is that HTML5 book by Jeremy Keith, and which is nice little book. Those little event book
Yeah,
apart
book
books,
apart.
they're nice because they're just nice to digest. There's nothing I can't stand more than a book this big on coding. I
Forget it.
just looking at it makes me want to not open it. But but those little books, those pocket-sized kind of books, are nice because you get a bite-sized piece of information. But I think, um, yeah, just designing for the web is the best way to get better at design, I think, especially when you're talking about like a user experience and whether your UI works, because you have to use it to know that. You have to design it, build it, test it, and the funny thing is I've designed things myself. It's funny, I've designed things myself and got them built, and then realized I've done something when I go back to use it that I'm trying to press a button. It's not a button or something like that. I'm going, oh, and I did it myself. I'm like, oh, that's weird. I keep trying to press that arrow I put in there. It's just like I put in an arrow for an aesthetic reason, maybe, and realized it looks like a button. And I fall for it myself, even though I actually put it in there. So, designing stuff like that and then using it straight away and testing it is the best way to know if your site's working. And I mean, I think, and I actually like, a lot of the work I've done, especially my own stuff, like my own website. I'm just keen on, I actually like getting out there and letting people on Twitter come back and tell me what's wrong with it because they're very quick to tell you,
Yeah,
like, oh, this does this, you shouldn't do that there. And it's quite handy. Just get everyone else to test it for you.
that is awesome.
Do you know what I mean? So as long as you're not worried about a few people making a few comments about your site, and you're just willing to take it as feedback, it's actually quite a handy thing to do, just to get live feedback. Obviously, I don't do that with companies' sites because I get it. I just do that with personal stuff, but it's just people using your site's a great way of knowing whether or not you're creating a functional.
Is there a piece of software that
Well, um, not really. No. Well, I mean, to be honest, I just spend a lot of time in Photoshop, Illustrator.
nice?
But it's literally pretty standard stuff. But I'm trying to think if I do use anything else. Um, yeah, not really. No,
Okay.
I'm just quite a basic when it comes to my design tools. I mean, like in a pencil, like we talked about in the beginning.
Do you sketch your before you begin a project, sort of sketch things out?
Yeah, right. Sort of. I do sketch some stuff. Yeah. I mean, I'll always like trying to think if I've got some stuff here. Probably. Yeah. Look, here's something I sketched down. It's just a very quick wireframe for a site.
Nice.
It's nothing to it really. It's
Yeah.
just this is for my benefit.
Yeah, of course.
But it's just a little pencil sketch of something I'm working on. But I don't, but depending. That's because there's a lot of content on this page, so I'm just mapping out what I'm going to be doing. But yeah, I'm not really one for using tons of tools. Not additional tools. I don't. I'm pretty much just like my design tools and email.
You keep it simple.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
awesome. Mike, I'm going to ask you before we wrap it up here today. Do you have one last piece of advice for I'm going to say creative, because it could be anyone besides, just a designer. It could be an artist or someone that does something else in a creative field.
Oh, I don't know. It's a hard one. I mean, I think I often get asked about, I get a lot of emails from sort of young designers asking advice. And I think one of the things I always, and I've said this a lot of times, it's not brand new, but is that really I think to a lot of designers, they have a dream of designing certain kinds of stuff. Whether, if when I was young, I wanted to design posters for bands and album covers, that changed. I mean, I feel I do now what I do want to design. I'm lucky that I get to design a lot of projects I like designing. But I think the key to being able to do that and to achieve your dream of designing the kind of work you want to do is really to design that stuff. So if you want to be designing websites for agencies, for example, like in doing sort of identity work for companies like I do, you should probably just start doing something like that, even fictitiously. Do you know what I mean? And I took on a bunch of free projects when I was younger, and in the early days of my web design stuff, and I just took them on specifically because I knew it was the kind of web design I wanted to do, and I had free creative reign over that. And so having a bunch of projects in my portfolio that really showcased my abilities in a certain area of design then attracts more people who are interested in that kind of design work. And hence the ball starts rolling and you end up in the right area. So I think, designing the sort of work that making sure you're designing the sort of work that you want to be designing, even if it means creating fictitious projects or doing projects for free for people, as friends or something, is important. Because you can easily it's very easy to end up, and I have to keep I have to keep tabs on this myself. It's easy to end up taking on because if you don't end up taking a bunch of projects on that you're doing purely for money, which everyone has to do, myself included, but if you do too many in a space that you're not too keen on, then you end up working in that space all the time. And if you don't want to be working in that space, you need to be doing the things you want to be doing, right? Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. It makes more than sense. It makes absolute sense. Thank you. Very, very cool. Mike, where online can we find you?
Basically, my website is mikekus.com, which is MikeKekus.com. Instagram at Mike Kus and Twitter at Mike Kus. Yeah. And Dribble Mike Kus.
Awesome, Mike. Well, thank you so much. And everyone, you'll be able to find those links on pencilversuspixel.com/Mike Kus. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time on being in the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll see you next year. And we'll see you next week. Thanks.
Cheers.